Hello everyone and welcome to my retrospective on one of the most important games of all time, Diablo. Diablo 1 is an incredibly special game, not just to me, but to gaming itself as a whole. Before 1996, David Brevik had been working on the concept and idea of Diablo 1 for a long time. The original draft document is even still available on graybeardgames.com. It wasn't until the serendipitous meeting between Condor and Silicon and Synapse that Blizzard North would be formed. They would then go on to release this genre-defining absolute masterpiece of a game known only as Diablo. Being someone who was born in 1990, I got to see the advent and rise of at-home gaming, and specifically PC gaming. As a young kid, I had played some PC games, Baldi's, Earthworm Jim, maybe even the cult classic Neverhood, but nothing was quite as visceral as the first time that I experienced Diablo 1.
I was exposed to Diablo because one day one of my brother's friends called him and said verbatim, "I'm gonna show you a game that you will love for the rest of your life," and he couldn't have been more right. He brought over the demo for Diablo 1.
While it wasn't much, all three of us were immediately hooked. It wasn't often that you saw this kind of combat and fighting and also violence in games. My brothers even had to convince my mom, who was adamant about not buying the game, that it was okay because the quest was to kill Diablo. She of course just saw a game that is essentially titled Satan, being of Latin American descent and origin by the way, and said, hell no, I'm not getting that for my 3 young boys.
Well, eventually, and thankfully, she was worn down and we got the game.
It wasn't long after this, by the way, that I was sent home from kindergarten because I got into an incident with a little girl while I told her that the devil was going to steal her soul. I wonder if my mom ever regretted her decision. Snap forward approximately 30 years, and here I am, still playing this absolute masterpiece of a game. Today's video is going to be part gushing about the original Diablo, showing some of the footage of it, talking about what its strengths and weaknesses are, and then examining the future of Diablo 1 in the form of modding through multiple different variations and iterations of the game that have been created. I would like to be fully transparent and make it clear though that a lot of the footage in this video won't be from the original Diablo, but rather a mod of it that I've been playing.
If you've ever heard David Brevik's story of the first time that he switched Diablo from being a turn-based game to a real-time action RPG, then you would recall the aha moment that he said he remembered he had the first time he swung his sword and killed a skeleton and its bones clattered to the ground. I have to say, I felt the exact same way when as a little kid, I walked into the cathedral, smacked a fallen one, and he spilled his guts everywhere with a shrill cry. I was immediately hooked, as was Brevik. He knew that he had discovered something revolutionary, and it was apparent to him. I had this exact same feeling as a kid playing this game. It's hard to properly convey nowadays where gamers have completely different expectations for what they expect from a game, but this game back in 1996 was terrifying. Everyone I know that played this game as a kid, we all have the exact same memory, and it's this.
Fresh meat.
It's okay, I wouldn't sweat it too much. I don't think there's a single person in the history of the world that met this guy for the first time and was able to stand up to him. Ah Fresh Meat went on to become enshrined in the Hall of Fame for best all-time video game lines, and with good reason. The atmosphere and the dread that this game instilled in you as a little kid playing it was honestly next level. I truly believe that along with being the father of all ARPGs that Diablo is, it also helped in some way to define the horror genre that PC gaming could inhabit. From its incredibly well-crafted OST that instills a feeling of dread, to the areas, monster noises, and sounds, this game is chock full of scares that if you're a young kid, absolutely would have an effect on you. I still remember the feeling of being terrified to go into the catacombs because I knew there were horn demons in there that would charge out at you from the darkness. And quite honestly, I don't think this is a vibe that has been matched by an ARPG ever since, and maybe ever will be. Blizzard North created something truly special when they made Diablo 1. And while this Sierra continuation was much maligned by Diablo 1 creators themselves, it was a welcome addition for most fans. But I'd like to note that it's very apparent in this continuation that they were not able to capture the same kind of dreadful tone and freakiness of the original. There's a lot more goofy stuff that kind of happens in Hellfire. I think this just goes to show that Blizzard North really did have something special that they were cooking up. They were in some specific kind of flow state that enabled them to make the all-time classic that Diablo the original is. For all the things that Hellfire did wrong though, there were many things that it did right. For one, really just adding new content to the game. Diablo 1, for all of its strengths, is actually a pretty short game with a pretty limited amount of content in it. However, I'd like to point out that Diablo 1 was, I believe, the first game to have procedurally generated levels in it. This meant that no two runs were the same. Every time you delved through the dungeon, you'd get something different. This was a novel concept. You might be wondering, why the hell are you still playing this 30-year-old game when things like Diablo 4, Immortal, and etc. exist? The answer is simple. For me, it's a feel thing. Those new games, they just feel, I don't know, in a way almost corporate to me. It's a little too polished, a little too clean. And of course, I'll admit there's a big nostalgia factor involved in this for me. If I was born in, say, 2000, I don't think this game would have the same appeal to me, and it wouldn't have impacted me as a kid the way it did back then. To someone that doesn't have my perspective, I totally see how they could look at this and see, well, it's got bad graphics and clunky game design. And where they see a pile of rubbish, I see the Mona Lisa. This game's art style, in my opinion, and graphics still hold up even today. To me, it's like looking at a beautiful oil painting, versus, well, what I'd call Diablo 4 is, to me, kind of like some AI-generated art. It just simply lacks the soul that I feel when I play and look at this game. There's also something about the narration, general lore and story, and voice acting that just really hits home for me on this and doesn't do it in the current iterations of today's gaming in terms of Diablo. The voice acting in this game is top-notch and in my opinion second to none. It's impossible to beat.
Beyond the Hall of Heroes lies the Chamber of Bone. Eternal death awaits any who would seek to steal the treasure secured within this room. So speaks the Lord of Terror, and so it is written.
I'm sorry, but nothing I have played in Diablo 3 or 4 has come even close to encapsulating the amount of just depth in this dialogue. This is dark fantasy done right. It's gritty and horrifying and disgusting at points even. It's something that the modern day adaptations, while beautiful and sleek in their own right and streamlined for playability, just haven't done. If I put on my uber cynic hat for just a moment, by the way it's always on, part of me feels like it's because there's simply too many cooks in the kitchen at this point when it comes to making a modern Diablo title. Accessibility and playability become streamlined. Elements like dark horror are maybe toned down a bit so as not to offend anyone too much, and the obvious reason for doing this, frankly, is to maximize profits. Modern day Diablo is made as a product for a consumer, whereas Diablo 1 feels like a game that the devs made because they wanted to play it themselves. An analogy would be a musical artist making their first debut album perhaps, that is born out of their personal strife or whatever struggles they've gone through, and then the follow-up album that happens if they're successful that is made more to satisfy a label and the potential audience that they already have. To me, these two thought processes deliver two very different, quote, products. The first one being not so much a product and more a piece of art, and the latter being very much so a product. Maybe this is all just an old man yelling at the clouds, and it probably is. Look, I get it. People want streamlined gameplay, they don't have the time that they used to have to play games when they were a kid, so they want something that suits those kind of needs. But I can't help but feel like somewhere along the line, something was lost. Blizzard got too big for their own good, and it affected their games. Personally, I don't even consider Blizzard as we know them today to be the Blizzard that I knew as a kid, where they made genre-defining titles one after another and completely revolutionized the game space. And honestly, I'll say it's okay, and even to be expected. Oftentimes with art forms, the initial output of whatever that art is its rawest and truest form. Every successful iteration after that typically deviates from the original formula. I'm sure the original creators of Diablo 1 are amazed to see that their initially thought up simply single player game has now been interwoven to have elements of MMORPGs, ARPGs, and other genres built into it. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the future of Diablo 1.
While you may think that it's just a dead game from 1996, you couldn't be more wrong. There have been multiple iterations of mods that expand upon the original game in outstanding ways, bringing modern ARPG elements like stashing, expanded item inventories, monsters, quests, and etc. into the original game, and thus elevating it to unheard of, unbelievably great new levels. These mods all have thriving communities with hundreds of active members every day, theory crafting in Discord and attempting to discover the depths of the mod. From Beelzebub to Technoborg to the Hell series, there's many different iterations of Diablo 1 that have been expanded upon and are at your disposal for playing. My personal favorite being the Hell series mod. The Hell series has been in development since 2006. The developers for this mod have done an outstanding job of working with the community to make something that is both very challenging and very deep to play. This mod introduces over 40 plus subclasses. You have everything from summoners to straight mages, new rogue archetypes, mage archetypes, monks, savages, and on top of all of this, they all have their own unique class skills, unique items, drops, quests, and etc. I have to say, I'm extremely excited for the future of Diablo 1, and I believe that there is still a great future for Diablo 1. It's really a testament to just how great of a skeleton this game is in terms of what Blizzard North made. They made such an outstanding game that it's still able to be played 30 years later and improved upon. That is essentially the equivalent of an artist releasing a song and 30 years later people are still covering it. That is a legendary, massive success. If you haven't played Diablo 1 before and this is all news to you, you might think that I would urge you to play it. But honestly, I'm not so sure I would. Depending on your age, perspective, and everything, I'm not sure that going and playing this game in 2026 would have the same effect on you that it did to me in 1996. It's all a matter of perspective, and while I look at this and see a masterpiece, I can definitely see how someone that was born later than me really doesn't see all that much, and that all makes sense to me, and I accept it for what it is. But still, this game holds an extremely special place in my heart, and always will. And I of course realize that as an adult, I love it for all of these more cerebral reasons, that it defined a genre, etc, etc. There's still something deeper to it than that for me. As a kid, this game called to me. It was the most compelling video game that I had ever played in my entire life. I didn't know that I was playing a genre-defining masterpiece, and I didn't hold any of the views about the game that I do now. I just knew that I wanted to kill monsters and get to the next level. And therein lies the true simplicity and beauty of Diablo 1. David Brevik has stated in interviews that Diablo 1 had to pass the, I believe it was called, Grandma test, i.e., you needed someone that was completely unfamiliar with games to be able to sit down and play through the game. With its simple click and point nature, and most things being able to take in at face value, this was accomplished by Diablo 1. As a kid, I was immediately hooked, and the simplicity lended itself to me to be able to get through the game, even at the tender age of 8 years old. But where once was simplicity, you can now find tons of depth in the terms of the mods that I previously mentioned, and this excites me greatly as an adult, maybe even as much as it did when I was 8. I hope you've enjoyed our little stroll down memory lane here. I know I have. While I do love modern ARPGs, like PO2 Hardcore for example, which I play all the time, like I said, Diablo 1 will forever hold an extremely special place in my heart. I would love to see a modern ARPG capitalize on the horror elements and atmospheric elements that Diablo 1 has in it, but honestly, I remain skeptical. There was just something truly unique and special that happened with this game. And while I'm sure to enjoy the places that I go and the new adventures that I have in whatever game I'm playing, I'll never forget where I came from. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, it would mean the world to me if you could share this video and subscribe to my channel. I stream Diablo 1 the Hell 4 currently most days, though I do plan to eventually branch out into other games. I'd like to do very much a full, comprehensive overview of the Hell 4 before I move on, and even if not, that's totally okay. I just hope you enjoyed the video. I realize that the takes in this are a bit jaded and maybe cynical to some people, and I absolutely don't fault anyone for enjoying a game. I hope you enjoy every game you ever play and it brings you great happiness. But I couldn't rest without just giving my piece and sharing my perspective on one of the most legendary titles of all time, Diablo 1.
I can see what you see not. Vision milky, then eyes rot. When you turn, they will be gone, whispering their hidden song. Then you see what cannot be. Shadows move where light should be. Out of darkness, out of mind, cast down into the halls of the blind.